Will degreaser damage the bearings in your bike? It's a question a lot of cyclists ask. So we've decided to do an experiment. Well, we're going to do 2 experiments. But before we crack on, make sure you click subscribe if you haven't already, and also click the little bell icon, as this will give you a notification every time we upload a new video. When cleaning bikes, we often spray degreaser around all over the place, like it's deodorant. But does liberal application of these solvents risk damaging your bearings? Let's first explain what degreaser does. It's a cleaning fluid designed to strip grease, oil and dirt from your bike. Now, greasy oil typically isn't very soluble in water, i.e. it doesn't readily dissolve. However, it is far more soluble, dissolves much more readily, in organic solvents such as petrol and alcohol, which are common components of degreasers. So degreasers are highly effective at removing oil and dirt from your bike. So what's the problem? Bearings contain ball bearings, which are then surrounded by thick grease to help lubricate them and prevent damage. They're also protected by seals, not the aquatic mammal, but little nylon covers that are designed to make them watertight. The thinking is that the solvents in degreasers can penetrate the bearing seals and then strip out the grease inside, and the result would be a bearing that performs like a mini washing machine full of cutlery. We want to see if this actually happens. So to do this, we've devised some experiments, but not just any experiments. This time we have got some incredibly sophisticated experiments. I just can't wait to show you. Oh, sorry, hang on 1 minute. Yeah, hello? That's what I was saying. Wait, what do you mean that the super high-tech mega NASA bearing test facility's been double booked? All right, bye. Looks like we're going to have to improvise. In light of the super mega high-tech NASA bearing test lab being double booked, we've managed to get the next best thing. Yeah, that is a bottom bracket on a stick. But it's the same one that Si used in his excellent video, Should You Jet Wash Your Bike?
We're really getting in there now. Come on!
I'm going to spray loads of degreaser all over the bottom bracket on a stick, and then I'm going to wash it with water, because this would replicate the cleaning process when you clean your bike. Now, I should also point out that the bearings have been completely packed full of fresh grease and sealed up. So afterwards, I'm going to remove the seals and see if any of the degreaser has been washed out or if there's been any penetration of the bearings. You should also remember, it's important to wear protection, kids. Safety first. I've basically used an entire can of degreaser on this chain set. So let's wash it off now and see what happens. This is my Charlie's Angels pose. I'm going to take the bottom bracket on a stick apart now and see if there's been any penetration of the bearings. I've taken the seal off and I'm quite surprised by this, but it doesn't appear that there's been any ingress of water or degreaser within the bearing itself. There is some water on the outside of the bearing and also on the inside as well within the axle, but that's to be expected because this particular chain set does have a hollow axle. But within the actual bearing itself where the grease is, there's no evidence of any water or moisture having got in there. So I guess this suggests that you can spray degreaser on well, in particular the bottom bracket area of your bike and rinse it off with water without too much worry that it's going to damage the bearings. So I guess this means we need to do another experiment. In this next experiment, we want to look at how resilient the seals on bearings are. So to do this, I've got 4 brand new cartridge bearings, and I'm going to create 4 pools of extreme bearing death. Pool number 1 is Degreaser, to simulate if you rode your bike into a vat of degreaser. Pool number 2 is salt water, to simulate if you rode your bike under the sea. Pool number 3 is Coca-Cola, to simulate if you rode your bike and crashed it into a Coca-Cola tanker. And pool number 4 is water, to simulate water. All 4 are highly likely scenarios. I'm sure you'll agree. So, in go the bearings. Right, I'm going to let those babies brew for a little while, and then I'm going to come back and see if there's any damage. Oh. Right, I've been leaving the bearings in the solutions of death for 4 hours, festering away. So now it's time to get them out, prise open the seals, and see if there's been any ingress in any way. So, safety first. Let's begin with the degreaser. I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, get rid of those. So I've taken the seal off, and all the grease appears to still be completely in there. It's untouched, it's nice and clear, and there appears to be no ingress at all, and it's moving really nicely. It's really smooth. Doesn't appear to be any damage to that at all. Quite surprising really, but pretty cool. So onto the salt water. This one's pretty interesting actually, because on taking the seal off, it appears that there has been some slight ingress inside the bearing from the saltwater solution, and the grease is actually slightly discoloured. It's no longer nice and clear. It's got a slight tint to it. So, and there does appear to be some small amounts of moisture on the inside. So, pretty interesting that the concentrated saltwater solution is it's got inside. Onto the Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola one is pretty intriguing. So, the oil on the inside, or the grease on the inside of the bearing, is no longer the clear colour it was when it first came. It's sort of turned Coca-Cola brown, suggesting something has got inside. And it does appear that there's a small amount of moisture on the inside as well. And it should also be pointed out that the exterior of the bearing is slightly browner than the other solutions as well. So Coca-Cola is definitely doing something to this bearing. Right, onto the water. The interesting thing on the water solution is that you can see that there's a sort of a stain leaching out the side of the bearing. Now, you couldn't see this on the other ones because they're coloured, and in the salt one, it's sort of buried in the salt in the bottom. But it does appear that there's been some sort of ingress or grease leaching out of the bearing. So let's take a look. Upon taking the seal off, it appears that most of the grease, or nearly all the grease, is still intact within the bearing, which is good. But it does appear there's a slight bit of moisture in there, and the grease in there has been slightly discoloured. It's got a slight yellowy tint to it now, whereas before it was clear. So it does suggest that some water has got in there and it has had an effect. The results are really interesting, but I guess the big question is, why did we see some ingress with the water solution, but we didn't see ingress with the degreaser solution? Well, it's a tough one, but my best guess, if I speculate with my science hat on, is that it could be down to the specific gravity of these different solutions. So different liquids, different solutions have different properties, and one of those is specific gravity. Now, this degreaser has a lower specific gravity than water. Degreasers often contain solvents which are less dense than water, hence why they can sometimes sit on the top of water as a separate layer when you mix the two together. Now, because water has a higher specific gravity, that means it can be better at penetrating the bearing seals than the degreaser. Now, what about Coca-Cola and salt water? Well, both Coca-Cola and salt water have higher specific gravities than water. Only slightly, but higher nonetheless. And salt water, well, that also contains salt, which can cause further damage and corrosion once it gets inside your bearings or other components. As for Coca-Cola, well, it contains a variety of things, but it also contains phosphoric acid and carbonic acid, which are only weak acids, but over time, they can cause corrosion. Although degreaser is less effective at penetrating the bearing seals than water, it does perhaps suggest that you shouldn't be submerging your bearings or bike in any liquid for a prolonged period of time. However, lightly spraying your sensitive areas of your bike with degreaser and then rinsing it off with water doesn't appear to cause any significant damage at all. And this is something that's backed up not only with what pro mechanics do when they clean bikes, but also Sai's jet wash video, in which he absolutely smashed the bearings with a jet wash and there was no ingress. So I guess this means that you shouldn't be worried about when you clean your bike, but just be careful with your degreaser and your water and everything should be okay. Now, these experiments aren't the most conclusive, and we're not professing them to be, but I am really impressed at the resilience of the bearing seals and also the destructive powers of Coca-Cola. But like any experiment, it has raised further questions, such as what would be the effect on other bearings on your bike, such as the ones in the jockey wheels, or what would happen if you left the bearings exposed to degreaser for an even longer period of time. Well, if there's any videos you'd like us to make and things you'd like us to test out, then comment with them in the comment section below and we might make a video in the future. Right, if you'd like to do any experiments of your own at home, then I highly suggest you head over to the GCN shop and pick yourself up a GCN apron to keep things clean and tidy. And what's more, if you put it on backwards, it doubles as a cape. And if you'd like to watch another video, then why not check out Sai's excellent video where he jet washes bearings down here.